Yo, Omnes. It has been a while since my last upload because, I finished everything I wanted to present to you guys from the Latin 1 schedule and from the Latin 3 schedule, but it's a whole new semester. And that means that Latin 2 needs to start learning things. Yes, Latin 2. And the first big topic there is for Latin 2 is, in fact, relative clauses. So, let's go ahead and jump right into relative clauses. Now, this, like so many other grammatical terms, is one of those things that, on the face of it might sound big or scary or complicated. What is a relative clause? I don't know. I mean, actually, I do know. That's why I'm making this video, so I can tell you about it. But relative clauses are basically when you want to describe somebody or something in your sentence, but a simple adjective won't do, right? When I want to describe somebody as a person who does a thing, or someone to whom something has happened, or, a thing for which some fact is true, as opposed to just saying, somebody is tall, or, something is heavy, or something is quiet. Whatever adjective you want to fill in. Adjectives are great when you want to describe somebody with a simple idea, but sometimes you need a whole complex idea with like a verb and everything to do the description. And if you're not sure what I mean by that, well, don't worry, I'll show you an example, okay? But yeah, we're talking about whole clauses of full ideas with a verbal meaning that is used to describe. And when you want to do this, you actually have to have something that signals the beginning of that clause. And for the relative clause, it's a relative pronoun. Hey, which means we also get to learn a new pronoun. I'm sure that's exactly what you wanted to do in January, is learn new pronouns. Especially after Latin 1, where you already learned more pronouns than you probably thought existed. Well, we didn't catch them all. We got most of them, but we didn't get the relative. So what this is in English is it's the words who and which. Now, specifically, it's who and which when you are not asking a question. I don't know if you think much about the way you use the words who and which in English, but in fact, most of the time when you use it, you're probably not asking questions, you're probably describing something, right? So this is not the who that you would ask when you say, like, who's the shrub, right? There's a hook throwback for all you, Robin Williams fans. It's not that kind of who, right? It's the kind of who that you would say, like, like, I'm the man who loves you. There's your Wilco throwback? Yeah, Wilco. It's your Wilco throwback. I'm the man who loves you, where that's not a question, it's a statement, and there's a description of the man, or of I, which is who loves you, right? And that's a whole complete idea with a verb in it and a direct object of its own, apart from the main idea, which is I am the man. All right, so that's what relative clauses are. And don't worry, I'll show you more proper examples that are actually written out. But first, you need to be able to recognize the words who and which when they show up in the Latin. And we've actually seen them before. I think you'll actually recognize these relatively well. No pun intended, but it's kind of unavoidable. So I'm talking about the words qui, quae, and quod here. I'm going to step back and then I'll close in on some of these in a second. But yeah, I'm talking about the words qui, quae, and quod, which we have seen many times in Latin 1. In fact, the word qui, the masculine singular nominative version, that's a word that showed up in, oh no, I guess it was the feminine one that showed up in chapter 1, but I think qui, the masculine one, was showing up by chapter 3. But we've literally been seeing these since chapter 1 of Ecce Romani, unless you're one of my few students who didn't read Ecce Romani, or unless you're some stranger that I don't know and you didn't read Ecce Romani. But yeah, the words qui and quae have been showing up basically the entire time we've been reading. Quod, that means which, not the quod that means because, but quod that means which, didn't show up quite as early, but it still showed up in our level 1 book quite a bit, just not as much as qui and quae. What didn't really show up in our level 1 book, technically it did toward the end, but they only snuck it in at the last minute. What didn't show up is all the other forms. You see, what they didn't tell you in the Latin 1 book is that qui doesn't simply mean who, but it means who specifically because it is the nominative subject form of a pronoun. And there are other cases of this, just in the same way there are cases of nouns and other pronouns. So in the same way that, you use of to translate a genitive, You would use that here, where you have qui means who, cuius would mean of whom, or if it's possessive, whose, right? And then cui would be to whom or for whom, and then quem would just be whom. And yes, these have m's on them because they're objects. Only the nominative who doesn't have an m. And then your ablative one, which of course is going to depend on the context of how it's being used. So this is what these forms look like. Now, I'm not going to belabor the forms too much. That's something that you're probably going to need to do on your own, is to actually like drill these and memorize them. Luckily, when you look at them, you'll notice they look a lot like your other pronouns. So if you do remember your other pronouns, then these should be pretty easy to learn. If you don't remember your other pronouns, go back and watch my other videos on the pronouns. And if you don't like my videos on the pronouns, then watch somebody else's. Latin tutorials videos are great. They're awesome. Go look at them. Just read your book if you need to. But do study these forms and learn these forms, because these are real common words that show up all the time, okay? That's why they did show up in our Latin 1 book. And it's not just these masculine forms, it's the feminine ones too, which you'll notice, by the way, there are a lot of similarities between the two. We've got the genitive and dative that are identical. Same in the neuter as well. And then other, similarities that probably aren't too surprising, like how you have quem and quam that look a lot alike, because accusatives usually end in m, or quos and quas. Things that really aren't that surprising if you know your noun forms pretty well. By the way, if you don't know your noun forms really well, go watch my videos on noun forms or read your book or any of those other things I already mentioned, okay? The one thing that I would caution you extra about on these forms when you're trying to learn them is don't forget that neuters have to match in the nominative and accusative, so you do get quoed twice here. But since it's neuter, you're going to translate it as which, no matter which one it is. So it shouldn't be that hard when it shows up. And the other weird thing to watch out for is qui. The neuter plural pronoun always looks the same as the feminine singular one. So you have qui and qui. I know my finger pointings are not exact, but I didn't rehearse. So that does create kind of a problem with qui, because it could be feminine nominative singular, feminine nominative plural, accusative nominative plural, and neuter nominative plural, and neuter accusative plural. There we go. I think I got it all right that time. I don't know. I'll find out if I got it all right when I go and rewatch this before I post it. Hopefully I did, because I don't want to refilm this. I probably won't. Now, here's the thing. So your clause is going to begin with one of these words. And which one it begins with is going to depend on what you want to say. But your clause will begin with one of these words. This pronoun, this relative pronoun, is the signal that you are beginning a relative clause. And like I said, it describes. That's the whole point. So that means it has to be referring back to something. There's some noun or pronoun in your sentence that is being described with these relatives. And that word that's being described is called an antecedent. Antecedent is just a fancy Latinate word that means comes before. So it's going to be describing some word that comes before it, right? And here's a real simple example of a sentence with a relative clause in it. And you'll notice I've got the relative pronoun here underlined in red. I've got the antecedent, the thing being described, underlined in blue. And so what this says is Leah, who is the smaller of the cats, runs very fast. So that's what my sentence says. Now, the actual main clause, the actual main idea, is not the relative clause, it's everything else. The main idea is Leah runs very fast. All right? So that's my main idea. But I also want to describe Leah. And, simply calling her small, where I could use just an adjective, doesn't quite get the idea I want. So I need a verb is, and I need some other nouns in here. So I have a whole relative clause. But this whole relative clause is still describing Leah, all right? Leah is my antecedent, and I'm describing her as the cat who is the smaller of the cats, all right? That's the way I'm describing her. And there's a really important thing to notice in here. Leah is a feminine singular noun. Qui is also feminine and singular. They're also both nominative, but it actually doesn't matter that they're both nominative. The crucial bit that I really want to make sure that you notice here are that they are both feminine and singular. All right, because if it is going to describe the antecedent, your relative pronoun that starts the relative clause has to be in the same gender and number. They don't have to be in the same case. They may coincidentally be in the same case, but they have to be in the same gender and number. It's sort of like adjectives, but not exactly. Adjectives have to be in the same case, number, and gender. They have to agree in every respect. Relative clauses, on the other hand, don't have to be in the same case, but they have to be in the same gender and number. If I didn't use a feminine singular pronoun, then it couldn't describe Leia. She's feminine and singular. My pronoun has to be feminine and singular if I want to describe her. All right? But they don't have to be in the same case. Like I said, these both are, but that's just coincidence. Leia is the subject of my sentence, and who was the subject of the relative clause. In this example I have over here, that's not the case. It says here, Luke, whom I hear crying, is in the bedroom. So my main idea, again, is not the relative clause. The main idea is everything else. The main idea is Luke is in the bedroom. That's the main idea, all right? But I'm describing Luke as Luke, whom I hear crying. And again, I have a relative clause here because I'm not just trying to describe him as crying, or I'm not just simply trying to describe him with some simple adjective. I'm trying to describe him as the one who I hear crying. And that requires the clause. And again, my relative pronoun and the antecedent that I'm describing are in the same gender, and they're in the same number. They're singular and masculine. Luke is singular masculine. Quem is singular masculine. These two, however, are not in the same case. Lucas is nominative because he is the subject of being in the bedroom. However, quem is not the subject of the relative clause. In the relative clause, I have a new verb, and in this instance, it also comes with a new subject. Audio is first person, the subject is I. So whom is actually the direct object. It can still start the relative clause, and it's still describing Luke, but it's the direct object of that clause, whom I hear crying. All right? So that's a quick example of how they don't have to be in the same case. I do have one more example just to bring it home. Make sure you get plenty of practice here. Plenty of exposure, I guess. Not really practice. But here what the sentence says is, I have two cats, of whom, or rather whose, let's go with whose. I have two cats whose tiny teeth hurt my feet. If you've watched my videos in the past, you know that my kittens like to bite my feet. They do a little less now because they're getting older. They still do it sometimes. And when they were little, like every day. Right? Thankfully, they do it less. But yeah, I have two cats whose tiny teeth hurt my feet. Okay? So my main clause here is actually just the bit at the beginning. I have two cats. I've got my subject and verb combo, I have. I've got a direct object, two cats. And then quorum is my relative pronoun. It starts a relative clause. And we know that it describes the two cats and not say me, because theoretically I could have a relative clause that described I as the subject. But that would have to be singular, and quorum is plural. It's plural and masculine, so it is describing the two cats who are plural and masculine, right? And here it's genitive. The two cats were the direct objects of the main clause, but here it's genitive because it is showing possession over their tiny teeth. Whose tiny teeth hurt my feet? So there you go. There's you a quick description and some examples of relative clauses. If you need to pause to look at those forms, go ahead and, roll this back and pause and look at those forms. If you would like to look at those forms elsewhere, they are in your book. So if you have your book already, or when you get your book, you can always see it in the back there or in chapter 28 if you're reading Ecce Romani. Again, if you're a stranger and you're reading something else, then good luck. And again, you can look these up anywhere on the internet. There are a lot of great sites. So check that out. Hopefully this made sense to you. And as always, if it didn't, make sure you are asking me questions in our virtual classroom. All right. I will talk to you guys later. Bye.